You're listening to the Religion Unplugged podcast. I'm Matthew Peterson. Today on the podcast, I'll be speaking with Grammy Award-winning gospel artist Jonathan McReynolds about his recent book, Before You Climb Any Higher. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh man, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I think just to get started, you're in the title, you talk about climbing, and your central metaphor throughout the whole book is the distinction of mountains and valleys. Can you talk about sort of what these mountains and valleys represent, and then how you landed on that metaphor, that image in particular?
Yeah, sure. Because I'm actually kind of flipping the normal use of it on its head. Normally, when we think of mountains, we think of high, beautiful, wonderful moments when everything is going well, and we think of valleys as the terrible places that we don't want to be, just a couple feet above hell itself. But for me, if you actually go to a mountain range, you actually go look at the Rockies, you'll see that there's a beautiful valley normally that these mountains are sitting in. There's grass, there's trees, there's even a river, there's some animals, all that. There's life. But then as you go up these beautiful, noble mountains, it just gets colder and colder, less life, less green, more snow. And when I started to really think about how I, as a grinder, as a hustler, as a worker, as an overachiever, as an artist, as a boss, all these titles that I've accumulated and tried to accumulate, it feels like I'm climbing up this mountain and just getting into colder and colder air. And I'm actually leaving the very lush, beautiful, life-filled valley below me. I'm trying to figure out why I become so consumed with adding titles, adding accolades, that I'm actually losing life. I'm losing touch with the original places and the lushness of life. And so I really wanted to just start to de-romanticize that mountain and encourage people to kind of humble themselves back down and learn to live out of the beautiful valley because ultimately there is no life on that mountain.
Right, right. And I think one of my favorite things that you talk about throughout the whole book is how uh, in the valley you don't get extra titles. You get to only be um, a son of God. Can you talk about how you had that realization that being a son of God was the one title that you weren't willing to settle for?
Yeah, you know what? It's amazing. We get we You don't tend to get likes from just being loved by God. You don't get a Grammy just being loved by God. It seems like you need to work. You need to do some things. You need to earn some things. You don't just get A's and a degree off of His love. No, we learn to work for it. We learn to earn it. We learn to do the things that it takes to make sure that we get these accolades. Unfortunately, that goes against the entire idea of what Christianity is, which is based on a gift. It's not based on earning. It's based on us getting something we didn't deserve. And so when you actually juxtapose those things, it is really kind of contradictory to live in this world where you know you have to earn things, but then also be able just to accept a gift. And so the idea is, can we get our minds away from, and again, we still have to work, we still have to earn things. It's still a great thing. I just got another Grammy Sunday. That is fantastic. I mean, I feel good about it. But can we learn to live out of the part of this life that was given? The part of this life where on your best day and your worst day, you're still a son of God. Because I think what happens is if we don't live from that place and we live in a place where we have to earn everything, we feel a little bit more used than loved. Even if we're doing it with God's name on it, it still feels like God's using me. I'm just one of his tools, I'm one of his servants, and I'm not actually identifying as one of his kids, which comes with a whole different benefits package.
Right, right. And you touched on it there, but I think one of the most interesting things that you're kind of holding in the balance and you talk about a lot throughout well, there's a specific quote I wanted to read that I thought really encapsulates it, which you say, quote, "My first instinct was that this rediscovery of Jonathan as son would first have to bow to who I was as an artist, boss, and uncle. God and time with him needed to jive with my schedule as well as the climb I still allowed to define me. And you talk about that very real thing of you do have to work, you have to eat, you can't just totally give up on your career, but you have to make space. What are some of the practical ways that you're finding now that you are kind of back in the swarm of everything? How are
Mhm.
you finding that you're able to better balance the work that you have to do and the rest that you have to do and the worship that you have to do?
Yeah, it's really just a mindset. It's really it's it's sometimes I remember just thinking I used to live on like a third floor walk up. I had to walk, I don't know, 50 stairs to get to my condo. And I used to think, there are people that exercise on like this. They use a stairmaster, and this is exercise to me. Why for me is it such hard work?
Mm,
Why can't I mentally take this as exercise versus taking this as work? So really a lot of what we do is so much in our mind and the way we process things. You can have the exact same schedule and be consumed by your identity as a boss. Or you can have the exact same schedule and constantly consider yourself a son of God. How would that affect everything you do? Every time you got on the computer, every time you got in the car, every time you got in front of people, you got in front of them not immediately and initially thinking of yourself as this great leader that has to show up with poise and save the day, but somebody that actually will be saved, somebody that actually can depend on. I can't depend on the people in front of me, but I certainly have an incredible father that I can depend on. So to me, it's not even always changing the schedule. Sometimes you have to change your schedule to get you to this mindset. But for me, it's understanding that wherever I go, it's not going to make or break me because I'm a son of God. Like this is just episode 504 of the Father and Son Chronicles, as opposed to this is everything's riding on this moment. And I think having that confidence in him, understanding that he has a plan, understanding that his will is his bill. If this is what he wants to happen, it's going to, and he's going to empower me to do it. And I'm able innately to do it. Why? Because I'm his son. I got his DNA. I'll be all right. Having that mindset, even in the same schedule with the same responsibilities, that's what shifts everything. Reminding yourself that you have somebody backing you and fronting you and siding you because you are his son, not just his tool.
mm, right, right. And I think something else that you talk about that's really important that kind of goes off of that, of feeling like God's tool, is you say, there's sort of an added pressure, I think, when uh, you're doing ministry work
Mm,
because you're doing God's work. Um, how do you navigate that now, knowing that okay, there are things God's actively called you to,
yeah.
and they might be hard things, they might be things that consume a lot of your time in your life,
Mhm.
but you're still making space, making time, and not letting that consume you, and then letting it lead you into pride that actually corrupts God's mission that you are supposed to be filling out.
I did I'm sorry. Sometimes especially in the morning, I'm so abstract thinking sometimes. But
No, no, no worries.
I did this workshop and I said, all right, guys, I need two people to help me out with these two jobs. There was a rug on the stage and there was a monitor, a little speaker on the stage. And I said, I need you to come here and I need you to be my rug holder downer. I need you to make sure that this rug doesn't move. And they looked at me weird and they kind of stood on the rug and just did whatever because it wasn't going to move anyway, but I'd let him know that I need him to make sure.
Mm,
Same thing with the speaker. I said, I need you to make sure, I need this other person, I need you to make sure that speaker does not move. And then when I said to everybody, look, honestly, these jobs were going to be taken care of. I personally don't need these jobs to happen. I really just wanted them to be close. And
mm,
ultimately, all the stuff that we're doing, all this incredible podcasting, all this singing, all of the everything. Look, God actually has all this under control. He doesn't necessarily need any of us to do anything. The rocks will cry out if we don't do it. But the
mm,
whole point is He wanted us close. And so if you start to think of yourself as Jesus is coming, let me be like Martha and start getting stuff together, then you will always miss the sonship. You'll always miss the relationship. You'll always miss the empowerment that was actually needed to actually do all those things. We need to learn to sit down like Mary and just say, well, since God is here, let me just listen,
Mm,
because the work will take care of itself. God doesn't need us to always prepare, a special place, for Him to feel welcome, because He created all this stuff. The reason why He gives us so much task and mission and assignment is because He wants our minds on Him. It's
mm,
a totally different idea of Him needing our work versus really just giving us a reason to come closer. And if we miss that, we kind of miss the point of life. I can't believe that I might sing people into heaven and miss it myself.
mm. Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think I was so impressed by how vulnerable you get in the book. Um, even just that, you sort of talk about how the whole project started off based on like a meltdown. You describe it as an outburst that really wasn't that long ago from the book. It would have been easy to write about something that happened 10 years ago,
Right.
and sort of be like, look at all the ways I've learned. But you were kind of writing this as you're learning and as you're working out of it.
Hmm.
Um, and you also have a job that's inherently very vulnerable, getting on stage and performing. And I'm just wondering what you learned about how much of that vulnerability you can actually give to people through this project, and how much you actually need to um, keep for yourself, because clearly it's very effective and helpful and
Hmm.
is part of ministry, but you can't give everything. And what is that looking like right now?
That's a very good point, and I think that um, throughout this, journey of mine, I think my first two songs that anybody ever even found out about was called "No Gray." The first lyric was, "Lord, I'm split in two. Part of me loves the world, and the other loves you." The other song was called "Loving Me," and in it, there's an ad lib that says, "Even with the pimples on my face, you keep loving me." So from the very beginning, I overshared to be. Okay. So I think throughout all of this, I have definitely carved a lane where I've figured out that for me, being vulnerable, or not even vulnerable, but being transparent about how I actually feel, um, and the things I'm going through, it actually really helps people. When I think about, I tell everybody when I make the weirdest Google search in the world, like, man, my left pinky, it's blue and green. Whatever I say, it's amazing that Google already has found 1 million people that have felt the exact same way, and they have an answer for why it might be feeling the weirdest, most obscure thing about you, people can still relate to. It doesn't have to be so, Christians, we like to make things so general so we know that there's an audience that can understand it. But no, sometimes your most specific issue is the one that people actually can wrestle with and deal with. And so for me, I do see a lot of utility and value in being specific to your story. Um, in seminary, I really just was inspired that God didn't just sit in people's ear and tell them, write this, write this, write this. He actually orchestrated their lives so that they would write that. The gold is in our lives. The testimony is in our lives. The God factor is shown in our lives, not just in our moments of feeling really holy and preachy. And so I'm just learning. I've always just learned that, or I've always just felt like authenticity was just important. And hopefully, God protects me from any kind of weirdness that could happen with it. But at this point, I feel like it's worked to the benefit
Mm,
of not who I am inwardly, but the impact it could have on somebody else.
cool. That's awesome. Yeah, and I know we're about out of time, but I'll ask you, I'll kind of end with this one. I'm not sure exactly when the realization of all these things came in terms of your music career and if you've produced anything since sort of you've had these sort of big recognitions of sonship. But whether you have or you haven't, how has the all these themes that you're talking about in the book about your desire for success and extension and the reality of needing to settle to just be a son of God and not be enough. How have those things penetrated into and changed the music that you're making now?
Mm. So I'm very mody. I'm very like when it's the season to write books, then that's all I think about. When it's the season to perform and tour, I don't write too much of anything. And so I'm actually just now starting to, as we release this book, I'm starting to kind of go back into writing songs again. And what I'm finding is where I'm at, and life has brought me here, the book has brought me here. I'm back at square one. And I think square one is a beautiful place. I think we get so good. Once you start trying to apply this faith and then it metastasizes into religion, and then it turns into how we apply it to politics, and then how we apply it to church, and then how we apply it to LeBron James or Michael Jordan. We once we move out of Faith 101 and we start taking all these advanced classes on how we're now going to manipulate, control, or judge the world with it, we just kind of lose sight sometimes of, wait, but do you believe God is real? Do you believe that he's listening? Do you believe that he sees? Do you believe that he knows? Do you believe that he actually sees and considers you as a son or a daughter of God? And so for me, it is very much getting back to the 101. One of my favorite parts in the book is when I realized that the disciples, when kids were coming up to Jesus, the disciples like, hey, get these crazy kids away. They don't know anything. They're on faith level 101. Get these guys away from him. This is a great man. This is a high priest. Get these kids away. And Jesus is like, no, actually, I want all of y'all to start acting more like them. I want all of you highfalutin elite scholars of the word. I need you to start actually reimagining your life and faith on maybe a more basic elementary level. That one, I'm real, I'm loving, and you can come boldly to me. Like that's faith 101. And so I think that my music, as I start to get back into this writing season, it's going to reflect a lot of the basics of things, a lot of the straight up faith. Before we get too cool and political and soapboxy about it, what about just who do you believe? And I'm really excited about that because it has juiced up my prayer life. It has juiced up my energy throughout the day. When you start being bogged down by your Christianity, you've missed something. When you start to be bogged down by your ministry, you've lost something. We have to get back to why am I here in the first place? What's the main thing? And that's that God is real and he loves us.
Amen, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's Jonathan McReynolds. His book is Before You Climb Any Higher. Jonathan, thanks again so much for being on the show. And congratulations on the Grammy. That's awesome.
Thank you,
Awesome.
bro.
Have a wonderful rest of your day, man.
You too, man.